The world of late 16th century France was not a place for the faint of heart. It was a landscape defined by the brutal rhythm of religious civil wars, the sudden silent arrival of the plague, and a life expectancy that made every grey hair feel like a death sentence. In this era, death was not a distant medical event tucked away in a sterile hospital. It was a public spectacle, a frequent visitor, and an inescapable neighbor. It is within this atmosphere of constant, vibrating instability that we find Michel de Montaigne. He was a man who had seen the void more times than most. He had buried his best friend, his father, and 5 of his 6 children. He had witnessed the charred remains of villages and the hollow eyes of those who survived the pestilence. For Montaigne, death wasn't an abstract concept. It was a heavy, physical presence that haunted his every thought. Most men of the time sought refuge in the church or the bottom of a wine bottle to forget his reality. But Montaigne chose a path that seemed, to his contemporaries, like a slow-motion suicide of the mind. At the age of 38, Montaigne did something radical. He walked away from his prestigious career as a lawyer and magistrate and retreated to his family estate. He climbed the winding stairs of a circular stone tower and effectively shut the door on the world. His tower was not a place of luxury. It was a laboratory of the soul. On the wooden beams above his head, he carved sentences from the classics, reminders of human frailty and the limits of knowledge. We follow Michel de Montaigne into his isolated stone tower to confront the physical decay and sudden mortality that haunted his every thought. He knew that the only way to conquer his fear was to look it directly in the eye, without blinking. He didn't want to be caught by death. He wanted to meet it at the door. He began to write, not for an audience, but to map the internal terrain of a man who was terrified of dying. These writings became the essays, and they serve as the first blueprint for psychological self-examination. Montaigne's method was what many would call morbid. He spent hours meditating on the physical reality of the end. He thought about the coldness of the limbs, the failing of the breath, and the way the earth eventually reclaims the flesh. He believed that our terror of death stems primarily from its strangeness. We fear it because it is the great unknown, a monster lurking in the shadows of our future. His solution was simple yet agonizing. Bring the monster into the light. By obsessing over the mechanics of the grave, we strip away the paralysis of fear. Montaigne practiced a form of mental rehearsal. When he traveled, he would look at every passing cliff or stumbling horse and think, this could be the moment. He was not being a pessimist, he was being a strategist. He realized that if you are always ready for death, that can never surprise you. And if that cannot surprise you, it loses its power to terrorize you. He sought to domesticate the idea of his own ending until it was as familiar as a piece of household furniture. Then, the transformation occurred. Something strange happens when you stop running from the shadow. As the fear of the end began to dissolve through constant exposure, Montaigne discovered a secret that few ever truly grasp. By looking at death so closely, he accidentally discovered how to look at life. The morbid fixation was not an end in itself. It was a filtration system. When you realize that your time is not just limited, but actively leaking away second by second, the trivialities of life begin to evaporate. The social anxieties, the pursuit of fame, the hoarding of wealth, and the bitter grudges of politics, they all appear as the absurdities they truly are. This realization transformed his fixation into the ultimate tool of radical, unburdened presence. Montaigne found that he could finally inhabit his own skin. He didn't need the world to be perfect to be happy. He just needed to be aware of the now, he famously said. When I dance, I dance. When I sleep, I sleep. This sounds simple, yet it is the hardest thing for a human to do. Most of us dance while thinking about work, and sleep while worrying about tomorrow. Montaigne, having accepted his death, was finally free to do only what he was doing. Montaigne's philosophy was never just in his head. He lived it through his body. Later in life, he suffered from agonizing kidney stones, a condition that in the 16th century was a precursor to a slow and painful death. While others would have cursed God or fallen into despair, Montaigne used the pain as a teacher. He observed the sensations, the ebb and flow of agony, and the moments of relief. He realized that nature provides the instructions for our departure. We don't need to learn how to die through complex rituals. Our bodies already know the way. This acceptance allowed him to find a strange kind of joy even in his waning years. He stopped trying to control the universe and started observing it. He became a spectator of his own life, appreciative of the small mercies, the warmth of the sun on his face, the taste of a good wine, the silent company of his cat. He understood that life is not a mountain to be climbed, but a river to be floated down. As we look back at the man in the tower, we see a mirror of our own modern anxieties. We live in an age that tries to hide death behind screens, makeup, and medicine. We treat aging like a failure and mortality like a glitch in the system. But Montaigne's voice reaches across the centuries to tell us that we are making ourselves slaves to a ghost. He mastered the art of dying to finally learn how to truly live. He shows us that the door to the good life is, paradoxically, the very door we are most afraid to open. We don't need more time. We need more presence. We don't need to live forever. We need to live fully until the moment we stop. To follow Montaigne is to take a journey into the dark to find the light. It is to acknowledge that the clock is ticking, not as a threat, but as a reminder to wake up. It is to look at the mechanics of a grave and realize they are merely the machinery of the universe, no more frightening than the changing of the seasons. When you walk out of Montaigne's tower, the world looks different. The colors are sharper, the air is sweeter, the people around you seem more precious, more fragile, and more beautiful. You realize that you have been carrying a heavy burden of fear your entire life, and you finally have permission to set it down. You are no longer a slave to the future or a prisoner to the past. You are here, you are breathing, and for the first time, you are truly, radically, and unburdenedly alive. As Montaigne himself concluded, the greatest thing in the world is to know how to belong to oneself. And to belong to yourself, you must first make peace with the fact that one day you will belong to the earth. In that peace, the real journey begins.